All right. In this module, I want us to walk through what I call the structure of a powerful conversation. All right. Because if you ever wonder why or how you're not getting your message across, why people aren't responding to you, why people are confused or frustrated, um, during or after a conversation you might have with them. And I'm talking a conversation that could be by text, by email, by phone, face to face, even through Zoom, like here. And I'm also talking about conversations that could be very short and sweet and brief, or more involved. And each one of them, with whatever type they are or whatever means of communication you use, they all should contain and make up a certain structure if you want them to be effective, productive, responsive, influential, powerful. And so, if you can keep in mind in your um, conversations, your discussions, what you might view as just simply a stream of emails or a stream of texts or a follow up to a voicemail or a conversation in a meeting room, if you can really consider all of these elements of a powerful conversation, you will find yourself, one, most importantly, bonding, connecting, building a relationship, and really amping up whether or not someone responds to you, or whether or not someone agrees with you, or whether or not um, someone takes action based on your communication with them. All right. And at the same time, it'll just kind of relieve so much frustration and so much anxiety and stress, because oftentimes, I'll have my clients come to me and they'll be like, gosh, Bernadette, I don't understand why this person or these people are not following through on what it was that I asked them to do, or I don't understand why they don't ever hit the deadline or the timeline that we talked about, or I am so frustrated because this person continues coming back to me saying, I wasn't really clear on this, or could you clarify something, or something doesn't make sense about what it was that was communicated. And what I really want to hit home on is conversations are two-way streets. Even when they're directives, even when it's an announcement, even when it's a debate or a conflict of any kind, even when it's a social interaction, conversations are meant to be conversations. They're meant to be two-sided. You might even say something as a directive or announcement or just a sharing of information, and yet that other person receiving it should have an opportunity to get any clarifying questions, um, or to even debate or disagree or suggest ideas, in response. So when you are setting yourself up and then other people to prepare a formal meeting or a very brief conversation that you think should be short and sweet and understood and responsive, just consider this structure of a powerful conversation that we're going to walk through, because I think it would solve so much of maybe the frustrations and aggravations that you're having in your own communications with whomever it is, at home or at work, whether it's with a spouse, an employee, a peer, a boss, whatever, a client, a vendor, it doesn't matter. All right. If you can consider what we're going to talk about, and this structure, then you may find yourself, or I should say that should expect that you're going to have much more powerful communications. All right. Which is a win-win for everybody. So let's talk through this and look at what a powerful conversation structure would look like. So here are all the components: everything from a greeting, you introduce the topic, set expectations, have a discussion, even people asking clarifying questions, kind of agreeing or gaining confirmation on what the outcome of that that conversation was, next steps, closing it out, but don't be confused because you're not closed just yet, because there could be some follow through. So let's break this down and see how it relates. And what I want you to be thinking about is how you would use this in your texts, in your emails, in your phone calls, in your, setting up and planning for a meeting. I want you to consider, all the different levels of communication you might have, and all the different means of communication that there are, and then the types, because the types of communication slash conversation is verbal, nonverbal, and written. So if you're sitting in a meeting and you really don't have much to contribute, so you're like, well, I don't have anything to add here or anything to walk away with, or whatever the case might be, just keep in mind your nonverbal, even by not being necessarily verbally engaged, speaks volumes to the other people in the room, on the phone, on a video screen, whatever the case might be. All right. So consider this for anything. So the first and most critical thing, and the easiest, quite honestly, the easiest, even for those introverts that aren't really good social butterflies, or they're not good water cooler speakers, or they're not just good at smoozing, or kind of having a social conversation with people. Even the smallest of greeting creates immediate bonding with the other party. So think about it. Say it's first thing Monday morning, you come racing into work, you kind of open up your email, you're dreading, if you haven't already looked at them on your phone, which 24/7 nowadays, right? Elevating the stress, elevating the anxiety, elevating the need for more connection, more bonding, more socialization between each other. So you run into work, you sit at your desk, you open up your email, and all you're getting are, on our emails we're talking right now, are directives. They're getting right into it. Like, this is what I need. This is what I told you. This is what I need you to be doing. This is the response. They're getting right into it. It could even be a text. It could even be a voicemail you receive, and you're picking up your voicemails as you're getting into work. Let alone if you have, if you work with anyone, or if you are the type of person who, when, say, you have a first thing Monday morning status meeting, and you go in, and either you're leading it or someone else, but they get right into stuff, right into it. And you're kind of like, oh my gosh, can we at least say hi to each other, find out how our weekend was, what's going on with X, Y, and Z, whatever. It is so critical for humans to have connection, to bond with one another, even if it, let's use an email, and kind of I go over the top, but I'll sit there and very simply, if I happen to be sending emails out first thing Monday morning, it's like, happy Monday, how are you, I hope you had a nice weekend. And then you work your way into it. You're not waiting for them to respond to those questions. They're just kind of put out there to, one, make that person feel as if you're connecting with them. Make that person feel as if they should respond and be like, hey, thanks. And it was okay. I was bored, or I had a great week, whatever. So you're immediately connecting with someone, even if it's as short as hey, Joe, happy Monday. And then you get into whatever it is that you're talking about, even on a text, happy morning, or happy evening, or thank God it's Friday, whatever the case might be. How does that immediately make you feel when someone actually is working to connect with you? Now, I also want to stress that this is just as critical for people that you know or engage with already, and then complete strangers. So consider going to the post office or the grocery store. How much better is it if you're able to be like, hey, good morning, how are you? Nice to meet you. Maybe you see their name tag. And my dad always taught us, get their names of anybody. So at a restaurant, hi, what's your name? Or at the post office, if you can't see their badge, or you're walking down the street and you happen to say hello to somebody, and then maybe they stop, say hello to you, you get their name. But it's just that bonding and that connection. So it doesn't matter how how involved you are with someone for you to kind of acknowledge that they exist. We all want to be heard. We all want to be seen. We all want to be, engaged with, connected with, bonded with. It's human nature to do so. So even if you're, say you have a situation and maybe you ordered something and it came and it was broken, or it wasn't even the product that you ordered, and you spend a lot of money on it and you've been waiting for it forever. And so your immediate response is you're probably frustrated, you're probably agitated, you're probably like, oh my god, I don't need to get on a phone call with a customer service rep, hear their music playing for endless number of minutes before they pick up the phone. But what do you think is going to happen if scenario one, you immediately get into, as they pick up the phone, you immediately get into, well, I received this package, I spent a lot of money on this and it's broken. Versus if you say, hi, how are you? What was your name again? I have a situation. Which one do you think is going to get a better response? Which one is going to be able to influence whether or not they want to help you, or I'll put something really dramatic in here, or they spit in your food, right? So, you want to really consider even the smallest of greeting. Happy Monday, happy hump day. Maybe it's the end of the day, you're sending a note to somebody. Hey, have a nice evening, but when you get in tomorrow, blah, 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 blah. So consider greetings as a vital, vital, vital part of connecting and bonding in any type of conversation, whether it's a text, an email, a phone call, something face to face or in person or via video, that connection, that bonding. And then you want to ensure that you're kind of introducing the topic. Now, that sounds very formal, but it doesn't have to be. Hey, Joe, I was just calling to check on blah, blah, blah. Hey, Sally, I wanted to see about X, Y, and Z. Setting in the expectation, or in this case, setting the introduction of what it is that you're writing about, texting about, calling about, meeting about. I can't tell you how many of my clients will come to me, whether they're ones that facilitate meetings or the ones that sit in a lot of meetings. And I can't tell you how many that come to me asking for help on, gosh, I'm invited to these meetings. I have no idea what it's about. I have no idea what it's about. I have no idea what the expectations are of me, which is the next thing. So whether you are giving the information, given the conversation, given the communication, inviting people to a meeting, sending that email, sending that text, sending that voicemail, whatever the case might be, ensure that you're kind of giving context around what is that conversation going to be about, formal or informal. What is it about? And then set the expectation of why it is that you're engaging this person, whether it's 1 or 5 people or 20 people. What is it, that you're needing or expecting from this person being involved? Now, you may or may not know, I play a lot of pickleball and I play competitively. So I'll play in tournaments. And so there's a number of like chat rooms that we use to talk with one another. And, so all of a sudden, someone will send out a chat like, hey, I'm looking for a partner for this tournament. And yet that's all they say. Yes, that is introducing the topic. I'm looking for someone for a tournament. But then it's kind of like, okay, but when, where, what, what level are you playing? Like, what are the specifics? And then what is the expectation is, so what do you need? Do you need me for an hour, a day, a week, a month? What exactly, am I coming into a meeting at work? Am I coming in to learn about a project, learn next steps, give a status? Do I have to do anything? So you could clear up so much of the frustration for yourself, but for other people that you're communicating to, when you're not getting responses, or when you're not influencing a decision, or when you're not able to get your point across clearly, or when people are coming to you going, I'm really not sure, I'm frustrated, over X. You'll get rid of so much frustration and have very, very productive results, which is what you're ultimately wanting is that desired outcome, you would get so many, such much better results in productivity as a result of it. Okay. Now, the expectations you also want to be setting is something I just echoed, and that is, what is your desired outcome for that communication, for that conversation, whether it is across the table or across an email or in a meeting? What is it that you're trying to convey? So when individuals will come to me and say, gosh, I can't get, my boss or my client to understand, the risk or the opportunity or the situation. And so I'll say to them, well, how did you introduce it? And what did you lay out to them? And what is your outcome? Do you want to achieve as a result of raising that issue, or raising up that opportunity, or raising up that disagreement, or raising up that, idea? What is it that you want to get from it? Because you understanding why you're having a conversation of any kind, by any means, will allow you to really kind of stick to the plan that you need in order to get to that why. Okay. So understanding what it is you want and why will also ensure that everyone's expectations are set as they're getting into this conversation or they're already in. Because if it's more formal and you have, lead time to have this conversation, then you could be setting this all up in that communication you send out to them, whether it's verbal or in writing. This is the topic of discussion. This is the date. This is the length of time. This is my expectation. This is what, we want to achieve, desired outcome. Then everybody's really clear showing up. How many times have you showed up to a meeting and been like, I had no idea why I'm in this meeting? Or the meeting happens and you're like, I have no idea what I was doing there. So it's your responsibility as much as it's the giver of the information's responsibility to make sure it's as clean and clear and laid out as possible. And that will minimize so much of the headbutting that many, many, many people do, both at work and at home. All right. So once you've, kind of greeted and you've introduced and you set expectations, now you're into the conversation. You're, into it. You're sharing your, whatever it is that you had to share if you're the giver, and then people are contributing, to the conversation. And now the conversation could be that they're contributing disagreements, confusion, frustration, contributing just new ideas, new suggestions, or they're just asking, questions, maybe even to challenge you, let alone to validate or confirm what it is that you're having this conversation about. And earlier we talked about the 6 P's of communication, and a great deal of that has to do with planning, preparing, practicing before you even present, process, and pursue. Well, this also, once you even have that, you then can use this structure of what that conversation is going to look like, whether it's on a text, in a voicemail, on a phone call, or in person or face to face, and it will amp up your effectiveness in your communications. Okay, so you then have the core of your discussion conversation. Another thing that I want to bring up here too is conversations are two-way streets. They're not just one way. Even a directive or an announcement or a delegation or assignment of something, it's not one way, because someone else on the receiving side of it may have a question or may disagree or may just need more information about whatever it is you're sending out. So even though you're thinking that, well, I'm just making this announcement, I just want them to put it on their calendar. Well, say they get this calendar notice, right? And they're like, okay, but what's it about? Because you didn't set the tone for introducing the topic or the expectations, or even talking points. So you have to be open to the fact that even an announcement or a directive or a delegation or assignment could be returned with comments, more information requests, questions, debate, disagreement. You have to be ready and open for that, because that's what a conversation is in whatever means of communication you use, even on a text or a voicemail or an email. All right. So then where people really slip up, and where they create for themselves the greatest amount of frustration, aggravation, delay, stress, is that, let's start with the person giving the information. They don't um, they don't end their conversation or wrap up or summarize to the point where they're gaining agreement and buy-in from the people around them. So especially for those personalities that are more directive, they're basically always telling as opposed to engaging and conversing and asking questions and being asked questions and answering. They tend to walk away without confirming that the people in the room agree or understand or buy in. And then they wonder why they don't get a response, or they wonder why, their idea wasn't accepted, or why, their decisions weren't followed through on. So the best thing you could do from the giver side is ensure that you're like, is that clear? Does that make sense? Why don't you kind of share back with me what you heard and understood? This absolutely is critical when it comes to getting into things like performance reviews or any difficult conversation or conflict conversation. Is at the end of those are typically kind of, agreement, confirmation that, things are understood, not necessarily agreed to, because you can agree to disagree, but there is some understanding there. Well, you want to ensure that the other party heard you, and not only heard you, but understood you, and not only understood you, but will do whatever next steps or whatever follow up or whatever, was left on the table, to ensure that everything was taken care of in that conversation. So that's the giver. The receiver, I can't tell you how many coaching calls I'll get. And it's all about the fact that, well, they were really unclear. And then it came back to smack me in the face, because they came looking for something and I had no idea that's what they were asking for. And I'll ask, as coaches do, ask questions. I'll ask, so whose responsibility is that? Well, they weren't clear. Well, no. That's true. That could be true, that maybe they weren't clear. But if you had any confusion, if there was any questions or any gaps in your understanding when you were either in that conversation or when you walked away, it's your responsibility to follow up. And yes, you can follow up, because I'll get that question too. Can I go back to my client? Can I go back to my employee? Can I go back to my boss? Can I go back to that vendor, and get clarifying information or more information, or fill the gaps, whatever the case might be? And of course you can, absolutely, because the other party will appreciate that, versus them getting frustrated because you all along didn't understand, or what, it wasn't clear, or you didn't agree, and so you didn't do anything, and they're expecting that you're going to do something, and yet you don't. So if you want to resolve a lot of the challenges between two parties, especially in the workplace, and at all levels, whether that's employee to employee, employee to boss, boss to employee, peer to peer, employee, to senior, it doesn't matter. You would increase your productivity, your effectiveness, your sanity by ensuring that before you leave a conversation, or before others leave your conversation, you gain agreement from them. You confirm that what was discussed and decided on, or assigned, or whatever the case might be, is understood, and everybody's good. There's no outstanding questions in regards to it. Okay. And then you also, part of your confirmation, and before you, what I call close out that conversation, is you want to ensure that everyone understands next steps. And again, this could be in a text, phone call, email, in person. You want to ensure if there's something for somebody to be doing, or if there's a decision that needs to be made, and maybe the people that are in the conversation aren't the decision makers, or if there's any type of follow-up that needs to happen, I need you to get back to me in a couple of days in regards to this question that I have. well, then you would just want to ensure that that's laid out and understood. And I'll have a lot of my clients that have these kind of disconnects with other people or other specific individuals. I will have them, even recap any type of conversation that they've had, that there has been not only discussion and questions and all that, but there have been decisions, or there have been assignments made, there have been due dates discussed, there have been next steps. I will, ensure that they are recapping those conversations and sending them back to whomever to then double confirm that everything that they took in and heard and understood is what was actually shared and discussed and agreed upon. So you want to make sure that next steps are highlighted, whether it's a social conversation, or like my pickleball, or tournament arrangements, or it's something more structural, more formal, more business oriented. It doesn't matter. And definitely take these tips and ideas home with you, because a lot of our challenges in our relationships at home, absolutely fall short because you're missing parts of this structure. Even the greeting. How often do you walk into a room and really never acknowledge the person? You just get into a conversation with them. You just start saying something, or they start saying something to you without even, and you're like, oh, I had a great day, thanks for asking. Right? So just ensure that everyone is participating here, and the next steps piece is definitely critical. So then you close out your conversation. Now, so closing out, thinking about this structure, you confirming understanding and confirming agreement or buy-in or whatever it was that you would need to be confirming, you laying out what next steps there are. There could be a natural, like, okay, nice talking with you, have a nice weekend, I'll talk to you tomorrow, make get with me, get that response back to me, whatever the case might be. But you're closing things out of the conversation. That doesn't mean the conversation is closed. Okay. And again, the close could be very similar to the greeting. You just don't like, okay, everybody break up like school does. All right. The bell goes off, everybody jumps up and the kids go running. Well, that's fine. And trust me when I say, I've sat in meetings, I'm sure you have too, where, you're the minute they say, okay, we're done, everybody wants to jump up and leave. You will set yourself apart, and you will continue that bonding and that relationship building and that connection. So you are influential. So, people do respond to you. People do want to lead people do want to follow you. You would gain so much more cachet and really stand out by being someone that's intentional about closing it out properly. By just simply saying, okay, everybody have a good weekend, or, hey, Joe, nice talking with you. Talk with you tomorrow. Whatever the case might be. But even on the close, as opposed to that image of, just kids, which, our employees and our teams and our businesses, they could be like kids, get up and run away. Just consider, intentionally closing. But the conversation's not closed yet. So this goes to, the follow-up, which is probably as important, if not more so, than the greeting, but follow-up's really close. Because again, frustration, confusion, lack of response, answering one part of a question versus all the questions being asked, it all has to do with follow-up on both sides. So again, let's go look at the giver. So the giver of the information, the person that held this meeting, that made up this phone call, that made a request, whatever the case might be. Yes, they might have, in their next steps, they may have said, okay, Joe, Sally, and Mary, I need you to be doing X, Y, and Z, and I need it by this, due date, or whatever the case might be. And you would expect that, then you should rely on those professionals to do their professional work and respond, but they don't. Right? Or you're getting close to the due date of when it was that they needed to respond, and you're sensing, okay, they may be late. As much as it is their responsibility, because it was them that were assigned And they agreed, they confirmed, they discussed next steps. You would expect that they're going to follow through and they're going to be, delivering what they want. But yet it's you that needs this work done. It's you that needs this information. It's you that needs this decision. It's you that needs this action or this change in behavior, or whatever the case might be with that other person. So there's an element of your responsibility as well to follow up. And if there's one word you can take away from all of this, it's proactive. So it's in your best interest to then proactively, touch base, follow up. Hey, are you going to be on time with, are you on schedule with what it is that we're working toward? Or is there any issues or risks or questions? Because I haven't heard from you and I just want to make sure that we're still on target. So there's a point of follow-up as well. But at the same time, if there's any chance that you think that someone might have walked away, and because maybe their silence is indicating to you, maybe they didn't fully understand. They might have nodded their head or said yes, but maybe they don't fully understand. Well, you don't want to wait to find out that they didn't understand, and then you're just screwed as much as the next person is. You're just on the short end of the stick as much as the next person is. So you want, so there's a degree of follow-up for you. At the same time, we are all professionals, and if we're given an assignment and a due date and it's clear and we confirmed and so forth and so on, then it is our responsibility to follow up as well. And at the same time, just because you leave a conversation, as I mentioned before, does not mean that you can't follow up and ask clarifying questions or ask to fill in the gap or to raise up an issue or a risk or a disagreement with something that was discussed. Because there's some of us that process information very quickly, and therefore in that situation, they were able to, work through any maybe disagreements they had or any ideas or any justifications or any, information gaps. But there's some of us that need to walk away and process, and need to walk away and really consider. And therefore it's absolutely not only available to you to follow up, but it's your responsibility to. If you process information in such a way that you needed that time in order to then really understand, how to handle that situation, then it's your obligation to go and follow up and make sure you get any questions answered, any gaps filled, any ideas proposed and maybe agreed to, maybe not agreed to, any disagreements resolved. Again, you may have to agree to disagree, but you raise it up, because again, everybody deserves to be heard and understood. It doesn't mean that you're going to be agreed to. It just means that everyone should be, open to hearing, understanding, and then deciding on, how to use that information. So the follow-up is absolutely critical. So if you look at this conversation structure and you consider your texts, your emails, your phone calls, your face-to-faces, whether they're formal, meeting structure, outlines, agendas, timelines, or informal. And I'm not sure if I mentioned, and I want to make sure I do, is at the same time, the completeness of the conversation means that you're not only introducing the topic, setting expectations, having that discussion, confirming output and discussing next steps, but even as far as like the next steps are concerned, you want to be very clear and specific about, what are some outstanding talking points? What are the decisions that still need to be made? What decisions were made? What assignments and to whom and by when? Are these next steps to be followed through on? Because again, people will get into meetings, they'll have all these conversations, they'll lay out, next steps and decisions, and yet they'll fall short of who's supposed to be doing something by when. And this is especially critical when it comes to emails, because people will put a slew of people on the to line of an email and have this big old conversation about all these things that need to be done, even by when, and yet they don't assign anybody specifically to doing certain tasks. And therefore they walk away, the giver of the information, they walk away saying, oh, well, I told them what to do and by when, and yet nothing happens. And the other side's looking at it like, well, I guess he was talking or she was talking to Joe and Sally and Mary and not to me. It wasn't, it wasn't laid out. It wasn't specific. It wasn't clear. Now, they should have the responsibility to go and say, hey, there was really no one assigned to any of those action items you put out there from our discussion. And, so you would hope that someone's going to do that. Too high of a chance that it's not going to happen. So from a giver perspective, you need to ensure that you are as specific and detailed as possible. Okay. And again, the other point I wanted to make was, so it was asked, how does this pertain to, I'm in the middle of an email stream or a text stream. So every time I'm responding or interacting on that stream, I'm not greeting, I'm not introducing the topic or setting expectations. And that's a very, very valid point. But what I would suggest is if you were to print that email stream, if you were to print that text stream, if you were to kind of print, that initial agenda plus any of the, recap notes, that would make a complete end-to-end conversation structure. Because again, you would just hope that there's greetings, that the topic is introduced and expectations are set, that there's, the discussion or the questions or the conversation as a whole, and then any type of confirmation or agreement, and then the next steps and the close, and maybe follow up, maybe not follow up. But if you get to close and there's no follow up and everything's good, and the announcement, the work assignments, the directive, the information sharing was all out there, and it is absolutely closed, and you can move on to another thing, then that's at the final close. All right. But as the giver, don't assume it's closed, immediately, because people could come back with a follow-up. Plus, you may have to follow up. And at the same time, the receiver needs to kind of really be sure that when they walk away and there is next steps or directives or assignments or to-dos, that any type of follow-up, that they actually follow through on it. All right. So leverage this conversation structure the next time, even if you were to practice it and use it for for a full business week, and just check out kind of just how it feels for you and how you might even, kind of consider how it feels for the other person. And then work on it longer term, because if you are struggling with, having people respond to you or influencing a decision or, presenting or proposing ideas or a disagreement or dealing with a conflict, consider all of these elements into structuring that conversation. And I can promise you, let me touch on difficult conversations for just a minute. This is even most important when it comes to conflict and difficult conversations, which I might have mentioned briefly at the beginning, because the last thing you want to do is walk into that type of situation and you just get right into it. And a lot of times it's opened up as the introduction as, we have a problem. We need to discuss your performance. We need to discuss that situation that happened yesterday. That just immediately puts the walls up for the other person, let alone it even psychologically puts you, if you're the giver, it puts you in a more kind of defensive, confrontational type of stance, as opposed to if you welcomed, someone in, phone call, face to face, or an email. Well, you would hope a difficult situation shouldn't be done on email, but you again, greeting, bonding, relating is going to be critical. Even let's be dramatic and say you have to let somebody go. You don't want to just walk right into that conversation. You want to kind of still create a bond. They're a human being with a heart. So even in difficult conversations, and then this structure is imperative when it comes to that, because it will help to remove the emotion and put the logic into it, because you've logically thought through how you're going to introduce the topic, what expectations you're going to have for both parties by the end of the conversation. You're going to have the conversation and be open to, giving and receiving. You're going to confirm that they understood that difficult situation or that conflict or that endpoint. You're going to agree to next steps as to what needs to change, what needs to happen next, what's going to happen next, and then close it out, and there's most likely follow up. So this can be used in any and all types of conversations. All right, I will leave you with that, and I'll leave you with this. And good luck and have fun. Practice, practice, practice makes perfect. All right, talk to you soon. Bye.